Under the pouring rain at bus stop 52, an elderly woman sat crying in despair after losing her wallet and being unable to pay the fare. Just as the driver coldly shut the doors, a 14-year-old black boy blocked them. Spent his last $7, the money he'd saved for his mother's medicine, paid her fare, pulled her aboard, and draped his hoodie over her trembling shoulders, without knowing that those $7 would soon bring a convoy of luxury cars and lawyers to the building, setting off a turning point that would change everyone's fate. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The rain came down in sheets that night, the kind of cold that seeped through your clothes and settled into your bones. Under the flickering yellow light of the bus shelter, everything looked worse than it actually was, which, considering how bad it actually was, said something. Charlotte Whitmore stood there, and honestly, she looked like hell. Her cashmere coat, the one that probably cost more than most people made in a month, was streaked with mud from collar to hem. She'd slipped on the sidewalk 3 blocks back, gone down hard on her knees. Now she was digging through her purse with shaking hands, emptying it onto the cracked plastic bench. Lipstick tissues, reading glasses. No wallet. No, no, no. Her voice cracked. She dumped the purse upside down, shook it. A mint fell out and rolled into a puddle. The bus pulled up with a wheeze of brakes and a blast of diesel exhaust. The doors folded open. Well, the driver didn't even look at her. Frank something or other, according to the name tag pinned crooked on his shirt. Big guy, the kind who'd probably been told he had a face for radio, and took it as a compliment. "You getting on or what?" Charlotte climbed the steps, her legs stiff from the cold. "I'm terribly sorry, but I seem to have lost my—" "No card, no cash, no ride." Frank cut her off like he was reading from a script he'd memorized years ago and was bored of repeating. "Them's the rules, lady. Please, I just need to get to—" "Rules are rules." He reached for the door lever. Charlotte's face went pale. She looked back at the empty street, the rain coming down harder now, the kind of night where you could disappear and no one would find you until morning. Her hand went to her throat, fingers pressing against the hollow there, like she couldn't quite catch her breath. "I can pay you tomorrow. I'll bring double, triple even. I just—" Yeah, everyone's got a story." Frank's hand was already on the lever. Out! That's when Jaden moved. The kid had been standing in the back of the shelter this whole time, so still you'd almost miss him. 14 years old, all elbows and knobby wrists, wearing a hoodie 2 sizes too big, with the hood pulled up against the cold. He had the kind of face that had learned early not to expect much from the world. His hand was in his pocket, fingers wrapped around the bills there. $5, 2 ones, $7 total, crumpled and soft from being folded and unfolded 100 times. He'd counted it 3 times on the walk to the bus stop. $7. Exactly enough for the bus fare and the painkillers his mom needed. The generic kind from the pharmacy on 5th, the ones that came in the white bottle with the label half peeled off. She'd been moving slow all week, wincing every time she bent down to scrub someone else's floor, but she kept saying she was fine. She always said she was fine. The bus doors started to close. Jaden's worn-out sneaker, the left one with the sole coming loose, shot out and wedged into the gap. The rubber squealed. The doors bounced back open. He didn't say anything, just walked up those steps, pulled the crumpled bills from his pocket, and fed them into the fare machine one at a time. The machine beeped with each bill counting up. "The hell you doing, kid?" Frank twisted in his seat, his belly pressing against the steering wheel. Jaden smoothed out the last dollar on his thigh before pushing it in. The machine beeped a final time. $7. Paid for 2. Enough for both of us. Jaden's voice was flat matter-of-fact. He stepped aside and gestured toward the seats. "Let her on." Frank's face went red, then redder. "You think you're some kind of hero or something?" "I think the fare's paid." Jaden met his eyes and didn't blink. "So open the door." For a long moment, nobody moved. The bus engine idled. Rain drummed on the roof. Charlotte stood there on the steps, one hand gripping the rail, looking between the boy and the driver like she'd stumbled into a play and didn't know her lines. Frank made a disgusted sound in the back of his throat. "Fine. Whatever. Just sit down and shut up." The doors closed behind them with a hiss. Inside, the bus smelled like wet clothes and old French fries and something sour that might have been spilled beer from 3 days ago. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in that greenish tint that made everyone look slightly sick. About half the seats were occupied. A woman with grocery bags piled on the seat next to her, two teenage girls sharing earbuds, an old man in a security guard uniform sleeping with his head against the window. Jaden moved toward the back without looking at anyone. His footsteps squeaked on the rubber floor mat. "Wait!" Charlotte's voice stopped him. "Young man, Don't worry about it." He didn't turn around. "But I must repay you. If you could just give me your address or a phone number, I said don't worry about it." This time he did glance back, and something in his expression made her mouth close. Not hostile exactly, just done. Like he'd learned a long time ago that promises from strangers didn't mean much. He dropped into the last seat, the one in the corner where the heater vent was broken and cold air leaked in through the seal around the emergency exit, pulled his hood up, stared out the window at nothing. Charlotte stood in the aisle for a moment longer. Her hands were still shaking from cold or shock or both. She looked at the boy's hunched shoulders, at the way he'd made himself small in the corner of the seat, and something shifted in her chest, something that felt uncomfortably like recognition. She chose a seat 3 rows up, not too close, not too far. The bus lurched forward, and the city started sliding past the windows. Closed storefronts with bars on the windows, a check-cashing place, a pawn shop, the kind of neighborhood where the streetlights were more broken than working, and nobody walked alone after dark if they could help it. Charlotte's fingers found the edge of her coat and held on. The cashmere was cold and damp under her touch, mud-stained and ruined. This morning, she'd been in a board meeting on the 42nd floor of the Whitmore building downtown, and now she was here, her wallet God knows where, rescued by a child who'd given away what was probably all the money he had in the world. She turned in her seat just enough to see him reflected in the dark window. Jaden hadn't moved. His face was turned away, but she could see his jaw working like he was chewing on something bitter. His hand kept going to his empty pocket fingers, pressing against the denim, then pulling away, then doing it again. The bus hit a pothole, and everyone swayed. The woman with the groceries cursed. One of the teenage girls laughed at something on the phone. And Charlotte Whitmore, who hadn't cried in 20 years, not since they'd lowered her husband into the ground with full military honors, felt her eyes start to burn. She blinked hard, looked away, pressed her lips together until the feeling passed. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, the bus rattled on through the night, carrying 2 strangers who just saved each other without knowing it yet. $7. $7, and everything was about to change. The heating system gave up somewhere around Maple Street. Charlotte felt it first, that absence of warmth, the way the air inside the bus suddenly matched the air outside. She pulled her coat tighter, but it didn't help. The mud-stained cashmere might as well have been tissue paper. Her shoulders started to shake. She tried to hide it, pressing her arms against her sides, but the shivering got worse. Her teeth chattered. The woman with the groceries glanced over, then quickly looked away. Nobody wanted to get involved, except apparently one stupid kid who'd already given away his last $7. Charlotte heard the squeak of sneakers on wet rubber. Then Jaden was standing in the aisle beside her, pulling his hoodie over his head in one smooth motion. Underneath, he wore just a thin, gray t-shirt with a faded logo she couldn't make out. "Here." He held out the hoodie. Charlotte stared at it. "I couldn't possibly. You're freezing." He pushed it toward her again. "Just take it." "But you'll be cold." "I'm fine." The lie was obvious. Goosebumps were already rising on his arms, but his face didn't change. "It blocks wind pretty good. Better than that coat." Charlotte's hands moved before her brain caught up, taking the offered sweatshirt. It was warm from his body heat and heavier than she expected. She pulled it over her shoulders like a shawl and immediately felt better. It smelled like laundry detergent and something else. Something young. Alive. "Thank you," she whispered. Jaden just shrugged and turned to go back to his seat. That's when she saw it. As he moved, the collar of his t-shirt shifted, and something caught the light. Not a chain, more like a leather cord worn soft with age. And hanging from it, an old military compass. The brass was tarnished, the glass face scratched, but even from here Charlotte could see the engraving on the back. Her hand shot out before she could stop herself, catching his wrist. "Wait!" Her voice came out sharper than she meant. "That compass. May I see it?" Jaden froze. His whole body went rigid under her touch, like a wild animal caught in a trap. For a second she thought he might bolt, but then something in her expression must have reassured him, because he slowly reached up and pulled the compass out from under his shirt. Charlotte's fingers trembled as she turned it over. The engraving was worn, but still legible, carved in block letters that had been filled with black ink decades ago. Capt. John Miller, 82nd Airborne Division. The bus swayed. Someone coughed. Charlotte's world tilted sideways. 82nd Airborne. Her voice barely made it past her lips. The paratroopers Normandy. Jaden nodded slowly, watching her face. My grandfather. He's gone now. Died when I was 8. What was his name? Charlotte's pulse hammered in her ears. John Miller. Captain John Miller. Jaden touched the compass with something close to reverence. He said this compass always pointed him home. Even when he was lost in France behind enemy lines, it brought him back. The boy's jaw tightened. Guess it works for me too. Reminds me where I come from. Charlotte sat back like she'd been shoved. Her hand went to her mouth. Ma'am, you okay? Jaden leaned forward, concerned now. She wasn't okay. She was 68 years old and sitting on a broken-down bus, and the past had just reached across 50 years to tap her on the shoulder. I knew someone, she managed, in that division. My husband Thomas. He served in the 82nd. Her voice cracked. She had to stop, breathe, start again. He used to tell me about a Captain Miller. Said Miller saved his life. Said he owed everything to a man who navigated them through hell with nothing but a compass and guts. Jaden went very still. After the war, Thomas tried to find him. Wanted to thank him properly, but Miller had already moved on, disappeared into civilian life somewhere. Charlotte's eyes were wet now, and she didn't care who saw. Thomas died 15 years ago. Heart attack. And I never got to tell Captain Miller what his actions meant, what they gave me, the years I got to spend with the man I loved. The bus hit another pothole. Neither of them noticed. My grandpa never talked about the war much, Jaden said quietly, but sometimes late at night I'd catch him looking at this compass, just staring at it, and just once, he told me. The boy swallowed hard. He said the compass didn't just show directions, it showed him who he was. Said every time he looked at it, he remembered he was the kind of man who brought people home. Charlotte reached out and covered the compass with her palm, feeling the warmth of it against her skin. Through it, she could feel Jaden's heartbeat, quick and uncertain. Your grandfather, she said, was a hero, and not just in the war. She looked up at the boy, really looked at him, saw past the worn clothes and the guarded eyes to something bright and fierce underneath. He raised someone who knows what it means to bring people home, even if it costs everything you have. Jaden's face did something complicated. For just a second, the mask slipped, and she saw the kid underneath. Scared, tired, trying so damn hard to be strong. Then he pulled back, tucking the compass under his shirt. $7 isn't everything, he muttered. Isn't it? Charlotte kept her eyes on him. What were you going to buy with that money? His jaw worked. He looked away out the window at the passing streets. Doesn't matter now. It matters to me. Pain meds. The words came out flat. For my mom. Her back's been bad all week. She works 3 cleaning jobs, and last Tuesday she fell off a stepladder at one of them. Been moving slow ever since, but we can't afford the doctor, so... He shrugged like it was nothing. Like watching your mother suffer was just another Tuesday. Charlotte felt something crack open in her chest. And you gave it away, she said softly. For a stranger. You needed it more. Jaden finally looked at her again. Besides, Grandpa used to say the compass points home. Maybe it pointed me to the right thing tonight. The bus squealed to a stop. The doors opened with a hiss. 2 more passengers got on, shaking rain from their jackets. Charlotte pulled the hoodie tighter around her shoulders and made a decision. Several decisions, actually. But they'd have to wait. First, she needed to meet the woman who'd raised this boy. The woman who worked 3 jobs and fell off ladders and still somehow produced a kid who'd give his last $7 to a stranger in the rain. What's your name? She asked. Jaden. He hesitated. Jaden Miller. Jaden. She tested it, liked it. I'm Charlotte. And I promise you, Jaden Miller, grandson of Captain John Miller, I promise you that $7 is going to change your life. He gave her a look that said he'd heard promises before and knew what they were worth. Charlotte didn't blame him, but she'd show him. God help her, she'd show him. The rain got worse. Of course it did. By the time Jaden's stop came up, the streets were rivers, and the wind was doing its best to turn umbrellas inside out. Charlotte watched him stand, pull his hood up. Except he didn't have his hood anymore, did he? He had a thin t-shirt that was going to be soaked through in about 30 seconds. She stood too. Ma'am, Jaden turned surprised. You can't honestly expect me to get off at some random stop in this weather. Charlotte gestured at the downpour outside. "I don't even know where I am." That was mostly true. She knew the general area, the industrial district on the east side, where the Whitmore Corporation owned about 40% of the property. But the specific streets, in the dark, in this rain, she'd be lost in minutes. "There's another bus in an hour." I checked the schedule. She hadn't, but she could see the way he was shivering already. "Besides, you have my hoodie. I'll need to get it back." It was a weak excuse, and they both knew it. But Jaden looked at the rain, looked at her mud-stained coat and her age, and something in his face softened. "Okay," he said, "but just until the rain stops." They stepped off the bus into a wall of water. Charlotte's shoes, Italian leather, custom-made, filled immediately. She gasped at the cold. Jaden grabbed her elbow without asking, steadying her as they hurried down the broken sidewalk toward a building that looked like it had given up on life sometime in the previous century. The apartment complex rose 5 stories, its brick facade stained with water damage and old graffiti someone had half-heartedly painted over. Half the windows were boarded up, the other half had bars. A shopping cart lay on its side in the parking lot, one wheel spinning slowly in the wind. "Welcome to paradise," Jaden muttered, punching a code into the security door. It buzzed, the lock clicked, and he pulled it open. The door dragged across the concrete, scraping loud enough to make Charlotte's teeth hurt. Inside wasn't much better. The hallway smelled like mildew and old cooking oil, and something else she couldn't identify and didn't want to. The fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered overhead, casting everything in a sickly green glow. The tile floor was cracked, and missing pieces showing the concrete underneath. They climbed stairs that creaked ominously under their weight. 2nd floor, 3rd floor, 4th floor. By the time they reached the top, Charlotte's legs were shaking, and her breath came in gasps. She'd done a 5K for charity last spring, but apparently that didn't prepare you for 4 flights in wet clothes while your heart tried to pound its way out of your chest. "You okay?" Jaden hovered nearby, uncertain whether to help or give her space. "Fine." She leaned against the wall just for a second. "Just need a moment." He waited without comment until her breathing steadied. Then he led her down the hall to a door marked 4C in faded brass numbers. The C was hanging upside down. Jaden pulled out a key attached to a shoelace around his neck. "It's not much," he warned. He wasn't kidding. The apartment was clean. That was the first thing Charlotte noticed. Spotlessly clean, actually the kind of clean that came from someone who took pride in what they had, even if what they had wasn't much. But it was also nearly empty. The main room served as living room, dining room, and probably bedroom all in one. A futon covered in a faded quilt sat against one wall. A card table with 2 folding chairs occupied the space near the kitchen. No TV, no decorations on the walls except for a single-frame photograph of a young man in military uniform, Captain John Miller, she assumed, looking impossibly young and serious. But what struck her most were the pots. 2 large stock pots sat on the kitchen floor, steam rising from them in thick clouds. The stove burners were cranked to high, keeping the water at a rolling boil. The heat and humidity from them filled the apartment, turning it into a makeshift sauna. "The heating's broken," Jaden explained, seeing her stare. "Landlord says he'll fix it. He's been saying that since October." He moved to the stove and adjusted the flame under one pot. "Boiling water works pretty good, though. Keeps the place warm enough." Charlotte opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out that wouldn't sound like pity, and she had a feeling this kid had heard enough pity for one lifetime. "Smart solution," she said instead. Jaden's shoulders relaxed slightly. "You want some tea or something? We got—" He opened a cabinet that was mostly empty. "We got tea. Tea would be lovely." He set the kettle on an old aluminum thing with a dented side and pulled down 2 mismatched mugs. Charlotte took off her ruined coat and hung it on a hook by the door, then looked around for somewhere to sit that wouldn't be in the way. "Futon's fine," Jaden said, catching her hesitation. "Mom won't mind." Charlotte lowered herself onto it carefully. The springs groaned but held. Through the thin walls, she could hear a baby crying somewhere, and a TV turned up too loud, and voices raised in an argument that sounded like it had been going on for days. The kettle started to whistle. That's when the door opened. The woman who came through it was maybe 35, but looked older the way people do when they've worked too hard for too long. She had Jaden's eyes, that same watchful, guarded look, and moved with a careful stiffness that spoke of pain barely held in check. She stopped dead when she saw Charlotte. "Jaden." Her voice was careful, controlled. Want to tell me why there's a stranger in our apartment? Mom, this is Charlotte. Jaden set down the kettle. It's a long story. I'm sure it is. Sarah, that was her name, Charlotte remembered from the outline, didn't move from the doorway. Her hand stayed on the knob, ready to push this stranger right back out if necessary. Ma'am, no offense, but he saved me. Charlotte cut in. Your son. On the bus tonight. I was stranded, and she had to stop, gather herself. He gave me everything he had, so I wouldn't be left in the rain. Sarah's eyes cut to Jaden. Everything. He looked at his shoes. Oh, baby. Sarah's voice went soft and broken. The medicine. You needed help more. Jaden's jaw set in that stubborn line Charlotte was beginning to recognize. I made a choice. A choice that leaves me without. Sarah stopped herself, pressed a hand to her lower back, and carefully closed the door. When she looked at Charlotte again, there was steel under the exhaustion. I appreciate what you said about my son, ma'am, but we don't take charity. So if you're here to... I'm here because it's pouring rain and I'm 68 years old and lost. Charlotte met her eyes steadily. Your son offered shelter until the storm passes. That's all. No charity involved. It wasn't quite the truth, but it was close enough. Sarah studied her for a long moment. Then her shoulders dropped half an inch. All right, but the tea's gonna be weak. We're stretching the bag. I prefer it weak, Charlotte lied smoothly. They sat at the card table, all three of them mugs of pale tea, warming their hands. Sarah had changed out of her work clothes, a gray uniform with Henderson Cleaning Service embroidered on the pocket, into sweatpants and a stretched-out sweater. She moved like someone whose back was screaming at every step, but had learned to ignore it. What do you do, Mrs.? Sarah left it hanging. Whitmore. Charlotte Whitmore. And I'm in real estate. Also, not quite a lie. She did own real estate. Approximately 42 buildings in this city alone. Tough business, Sarah said neutrally. It can be. And you're in cleaning services. 3 different companies. Sarah wrapped both hands around her mug like she was trying to draw warmth from it. Henderson's on weekdays, Valley View on Saturdays, and private homes Sunday through Tuesday nights. That's... Charlotte did the math in her head. That's almost 80 hours a week. 83 usually. Sarah's voice was matter of fact. Gotta be 83 to make the rent and keep food on the table. She glanced at Jaden. And keep this one in school where he belongs. Mom, don't mom me. You're staying in school. Sarah's tone said this was an old argument. I didn't work this hard so you could drop out and bag groceries. Jaden's face did that complicated thing. Again, love and frustration all mixed together. I could help. You can help by keeping your grades up and getting into a good college. That's how you help. Charlotte watched this exchange and felt something tighten in her throat. She'd had these same arguments with Thomas decades ago when his construction business was struggling and he'd wanted to sell his truck to make ends meet. She'd forbidden it, made him promise to keep building, keep trying. It had worked out eventually. He'd gotten a contract with the city, then another, and 3 years later they'd bought their first apartment building. But those early years... What happened to your back? Charlotte asked gently. Sarah's face closed off. Accident at work. What kind of accident? The kind where I fell off a stepladder trying to clean a chandelier. Sarah's voice went flat. At the Vanderbilt estate. You know it. Charlotte knew it. Elizabeth Vanderbilt, her primary business rival for the last 30 years. A woman who'd made her fortune in tech and used it to buy up half the city's luxury properties. They'd clashed at every city council meeting, every charity board, every social function. I'm familiar, Charlotte said carefully. Well, Mrs. Vanderbilt has a very expensive chandelier, 20 feet up. And when I was on the ladder, one of the rungs broke. Sarah's jaw tightened. I managed to catch the railing, but I dropped the cleaning supplies, broke a crystal glass. Baccarat, apparently. Worth $300. Surely she has insurance. She docked my pay. Half a day's wages. Said it came out of my carelessness. Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. Funny thing is, I told her supervisor that ladder was unstable last month. Asked them to replace it. But I guess $300 for a new ladder was too expensive. Charlotte's hands tightened on her mug. That's illegal. Workers' compensation should a lot of things. Sarah cut her off. But when you're undocumented, when you're working under the table, you don't get to complain. You just smile and say, yes, ma'am, and hope they don't fire you. The baby in the next apartment started crying again. The argument down the hall got louder. When's the rent due? Charlotte asked quietly. Sarah's face went very still. Tomorrow. Noon. How much? With all due respect, ma'am, that's not your concern. Humor me. Sarah looked at Jaden, then back at Charlotte. Something in the older woman's face must have convinced her because she said $800, which I don't have because of the dock pay and because… She gestured vaguely at the universe. Because life. Your landlord, Charlotte said. What's his name? Kowalski. Victor Kowalski. And before you ask, yeah, he's exactly as charming as he sounds. As if summoned by his name, someone started pounding on the door. Not knocking, pounding. The kind of sound that said authority and threat and don't even think about ignoring me. Sarah's face went gray. The pounding came again harder this time. 3 heavy blows that made the door shudder in its frame. I know you're in there, Sarah. The voice was thick, rough like gravel being dragged across concrete. Open up. Sarah stood slowly, her hand pressed against her lower back. Stay here, she told Jaden. Mom, stay. Here. She crossed to the door and opened it just wide enough to speak through. Charlotte could see part of a large man filling the doorway, broad shoulders, thick neck, the edge of a tattoo creeping up from his collar. Mr. Kowalski! Sarah kept her voice level. It's late. Yeah, well, rent's due tomorrow, and I got a feeling you're gonna try to weasel out of it again. Kowalski pushed the door wider, forcing Sarah to step back. He filled the doorway, taking up all the space, all the air. So, I'm here to make sure we understand each other. He was maybe 50, with a shaved head that showed more scars than skin, and arms like tree trunks covered in faded ink. A stained white t-shirt stretched across his gut. He smelled like cigarettes and cheap cologne. His eyes swept the apartment, landing on Jaden, then Charlotte. Well, well, got company moving up in the world, Sarah. His smile showed yellow teeth. That's nice, real nice, but guests don't pay the rent. I'll have your money tomorrow. Sarah's voice stayed steady, but Charlotte could see her hands trembling. You said that last month, and the month before. Kowalski pulled a cigarette from behind his ear, lit it right there in the doorway. Blew smoke into the apartment. I'm a patient man, Sarah, real patient, but my patience has limits. I said I'll have it. How? He laughed a wet, phlegmy sound. You gonna pull $800 out of your ass. You got 3 jobs, and you still can't make the rent on time. Face it, sweetheart, you're done here. Jaden stood up. Don't talk to her like that. Kowalski's attention swung to him like a searchlight. What did you say, boy? Jaden, sit down. Sarah's voice cracked, but Jaden didn't sit. He stood there, all 6 feet of 14-year-old fury, hands clenched at his sides. I said don't talk to her like that. Or what? Kowalski took a step into the apartment, then another. He was at least 6'2" and probably 250, all of it mean. You gonna do something about it, Junior? That what you think? Mr. Kowalski, please. Sarah moved between them. Please, what? Please be nice. Please give you more time. Kowalski's face twisted. You know what your problem is, Sarah. You're soft. You and this kid, both of you. Too soft for this world. He reached into a garbage bag he'd brought with him. Charlotte hadn't noticed it before and pulled out a handful of trash. Rotting food, wet newspapers, something that might have been a diaper. He threw it onto the floor of the apartment. That's from 3B. They moved out last week, left their garbage. Figured you could have it since you're going to be joining them soon. Get out. Sarah's voice shook now. Get out of my home. Your home, Kowalski laughed again. It's my home, Sarah. I own it. You just live here. And in… He made a show of checking his watch. In about 16 hours, you don't even do that anymore. That's when his eyes landed on Charlotte again, still sitting at the card table with her weak tea. Who's the old lady? He walked toward her, leaving wet footprints on the clean floor. She paying you to crash here? That it you running some kind of boarding house without telling me? She's a guest. Sarah's voice was desperate now. Just until the rain. I don't allow guests. Says so in the lease. Additional occupants require written permission and a $50 monthly fee. Kowalski bent down, peering at Charlotte. His breath was terrible. So either she pays up or she leaves. Right now. Charlotte looked at him. Really looked at him. At the stained shirt and the cigarette and the casual cruelty in his eyes. She'd met men like this before. Men who had a little bit of power and used it to make themselves feel big by making others feel small. I think, she said quietly, that you should leave. Kowalski blinked. Then he started laughing. You think. He turned to Sarah. Where'd you find this one, the nursing home? I'm serious, Charlotte continued in that same quiet voice. You should leave this apartment. Leave this building, actually. While you still can. Something in her tone made him stop laughing. He straightened up, looking at her more carefully now. That a threat, Grandma? An observation. His face went red. You know what, screw the 16 hours. I want you out tonight, all of you. Pack your shit and… No. Sarah stepped forward. The lease says we have until noon tomorrow. That's the law. The law. Kowalski's voice rose. You want to talk about the law? Fine. Let's talk about the law. Let's talk about how you're living here with no proper documentation. Let's talk about how you're working off the books paying no taxes. Let's talk about what happens when I make a phone call to INS. Sarah went white. Yeah, Kowalski said softly. That's what I thought. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to be out by noon tomorrow, or I make that call. We clear? Crystal, Sarah whispered. Good. He dropped the cigarette on the floor, ground it out with his boot, headed for the door, paused. Oh, and Sarah, don't even think about stiffing me on the cleaning deposit. I want this place spotless when you leave. Every stain, every mark. Otherwise, I keep it all. He left. The door hung open behind him. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Sarah's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the floor right there by the pots of boiling water and put her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook, but she didn't make a sound. Jaden went to her, knelt beside her, put his arms around her. We'll figure it out, he said. We always figure it out. But his voice was thin, stretched tight over desperation. Charlotte stood. Her legs felt steadier now, her mind clearer. The fog that had been hanging over her thoughts all day, the confusion, the disorientation burned away like morning mist. She walked to the phone on the wall, an old rotary phone, the kind you didn't see anymore. She picked up the receiver, heard the dial tone, and smiled. What are you doing? Jaden asked. Making a phone call, Charlotte said. Ma'am, we can't afford. I can. She started dialing her finger, finding each number with practiced ease, a number she'd known by heart for 40 years. The phone rang, once, twice. Then a voice answered, sharp and alert despite the late hour. Whitmore residence. Arthur, Charlotte said, and the relief in her voice was palpable. It's me. A pause. Then Mrs. Whitmore. My God, where have you been? We've been searching. I know. I'm sorry. I've been indisposed. She glanced at Jaden and Sarah, both staring at her now. I need you to bring the car. The Phantom. Of course. Where are you? Charlotte looked at the address taped to the wall by the phone. Parkside Apartments, 4C East District. She paused. And Arthur, bring the legal team. All of them. I don't care if you have to drag them out of bed. Another pause, longer this time. Mrs. Whitmore, is everything all right? Everything, Charlotte said, is about to be. Sarah was on her feet now, moving toward Charlotte with her hands raised. Ma'am, you can't just… Charlotte held up one finger. Wait. Arthur, listen carefully. I need you to pull all records on a Victor Kowalski, Kowalski. He owns this building and possibly others in the area. I want to know every property, every violation, every complaint filed against him. Certainly. Anything else? Yes. Contact Robert at the bank. Tell him to prepare a letter of credit, full backing of Whitmore assets, and get me Marcus from acquisitions. I want to know what it would take to buy this building. Tonight. Mrs. Whitmore. Arthur's voice held a note of concern. It's nearly midnight. Perhaps in the morning. Arthur. Charlotte's voice hardened. How long have you worked for me? 42 years, ma'am. And in those 42 years, have I ever asked you for something I didn't need? A sigh. No, ma'am. Then trust me now. I need you here. With the car, with the lawyers, with everything. And, Arthur, bring my checkbook. The personal one, or both? She hung up. The apartment was dead silent. Even the baby next door had stopped crying. Who the hell are you? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Charlotte turned to face them, straightened her spine, lifted her chin. For the first time since she'd stumbled off that bus, she looked like what she was, a woman who'd built an empire from nothing and defended it against every challenger for 4 decades. My full name, she said, is Charlotte Ann Whitmore. I'm the founder and CEO of Whitmore Property Holdings. We manage approximately 428 buildings across 6 states. Our annual revenue is somewhere north of $2 billion, though I'd have to check with accounting to be sure. Jaden's mouth fell open. Sarah backed up a step, then another. You're Charlotte Whitmore, the Charlotte Whitmore. I prefer just Charlotte, but yes. The woman who… Sarah's hand went to her throat. The woman who owns half the waterfront, who funded the new children's hospital, Who got mugged this morning in front of her own building by two men who thought an old woman was an easy target? Charlotte's voice was dry. They got my purse, my phone, my wallet, everything. I've spent the last 8 hours wandering this city like a ghost, and I would have spent the night in the rain if your son hadn't— She stopped, looked at Jaden. If your son hadn't been brave enough to give everything he had to help a stranger. Jaden shook his head slowly. You could have been anyone. You could have been— But I wasn't anyone. Charlotte crossed to him, took both his hands in hers. I was the granddaughter-in-law of Captain John Miller, and you saved me just like your grandfather saved my husband. She squeezed his hands. Do you believe in fate, Jaden? I don't know. Neither did I. Until tonight. Sarah was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I don't understand. Why are you helping us? We're nobody. You're the mother of the boy who kept me from freezing to death on a bus. Charlotte's voice was firm. And more than that, you're a woman who works 83 hours a week to give her son a chance at something better. Do you really think I don't recognize that kind of strength? But we can't repay. I'm not asking you to repay anything. Charlotte looked between them. I'm asking you to let me settle a debt that's 50 years overdue. A sound outside. Engines. Multiple engines. Jaden moved to the window, pulled back the thin curtain, and froze. Mom, you need to see this. Sarah joined him. Charlotte already knew what they'd see, but she looked anyway. 3 black Cadillac Escalades lined the street hazard lights, blinking in the rain. And between them, gleaming like a silver ghost, sat a Rolls-Royce Phantom. Even from 4 stories up, even through the rain, it was unmistakably the most expensive thing most people in this neighborhood had ever seen. Doors opened. Men in dark suits emerged, holding umbrellas, moving with military precision. And from the Phantom, an elderly man in a perfectly tailored vest stepped out. Arthur. He looked up at the building, spotted Charlotte in the window, and bowed his head slightly. Holy shit, Jaden breathed. Language, Sarah said automatically, then, but yeah. Holy shit. Charlotte smoothed down her borrowed hoodie. I should go meet them. Would you? She hesitated. Would you come with me? Both of you. Dressed like this? Sarah gestured at her sweatpants. Dressed exactly like that. Charlotte's smile was fierce, now predatory. I want Kowalski to see you standing next to me when I take everything he has. They took the stairs down. Charlotte's legs were steadier now, powered by adrenaline and righteous anger. By the time they reached the ground floor, a crowd had gathered, residents peeking outdoors, faces pressed against windows, everyone wanting to see what the commotion was about. Arthur met them at the entrance, 2 vases holding an umbrella over his head. Up close, he was exactly what a proper English butler should be, ramrod straight, silver-haired, with eyes that missed nothing. Mrs. Whitmore. He looked her up and down, taking in the muddy coat, the oversized hoodie, the ruined shoes. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened. I'm glad to see you're safe. I'm glad to be safe, Arthur. She touched his arm briefly. Thank you for coming. Of course, ma'am. He produced a phone from his pocket. The team is standing by. Mr. Chen from Legal, Miss Rodriguez from Acquisitions, and Mr. Baxter from Accounting. They're prepared to work through the night if necessary. It will be necessary. Charlotte turned to Sarah and Jaden, who stood slightly behind her, looking shell-shocked. Arthur, this is Sarah Miller and her son Jaden. They've been my hosts this evening. Arthur's eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch for him, a show of extreme surprise, but he recovered instantly. A pleasure to meet you both. He bowed slightly at the waist. Any friend of Mrs. Whitmore's is, of course, a friend of the Whitmore household. Arthur is my— well, I suppose assistant doesn't quite cover it. Charlotte smiled. He's been running my life since before either of you were born. Someone has to, ma'am. Arthur's tone was perfectly dry. Left to your own devices, you'd work yourself to death and forget to eat lunch. Despite everything, Charlotte laughed. Probably true. A door slammed above them. Heavy footsteps on the stairs. That'll be Kowalski. Sarah murmured. Good. Charlotte's smile turned sharp. I've been wanting to meet him properly. The landlord appeared on the second-floor landing, his face red and furious. What the hell is going on down here? You think you can just— He stopped dead when he saw the cars. The men in suits. Arthur in his 3-piece vest. His eyes swung to Charlotte, still wearing Jaden's hoodie and her muddy coat. For a moment, confusion crossed his face, then recognition slow and dawning. Oh shit, he said. Indeed, Charlotte replied. Mr. Kowalski, I presume we need to talk. About this building, about your tenants. and about what's going to happen next. She started walking toward him, Arthur one step behind Sarah and Jaden flanking her sides. And Victor Kowalski, who'd spent years making people feel small, took a step backward. Kowalski recovered fast. Charlotte had to give him that much. "Listen, lady, I don't care who you think you are." He started down the stairs, each step heavy with false confidence. "You can't just roll up here with your fancy cars and—" "Arthur!" Charlotte didn't raise her voice. Didn't need to. Arthur pulled a tablet from inside his jacket, tapped it twice, and turned it to face Kowalski. "Victor Kowalski, age 53, owner of Parkside Apartments and 6 other properties in the East District, all purchased through questionable loans from Meridian Capital between 2018 and 2022. Currently in violation of," he scrolled, "47 housing code violations across your properties: unlicensed electrical work, unpermitted construction, failure to maintain essential services, heating specifically." He looked up. "Shall I continue?" Kowalski's face went from red to purple. "You can't just, that's private information. It's public record, actually." Arthur's tone was almost bored. "It took my team approximately 45 minutes to compile. Your building inspector is remarkably thorough in his reports. Shame you've been ignoring them." More doors were opening now. Mrs. Chen from 2A, who Charlotte had heard through the walls earlier, the young couple from 3C with the baby, an elderly man with a walker from the first floor. They gathered in doorways on the stairs watching. "You got no right," Kowalski started. "I have every right." Charlotte stepped forward, and something in her movement made him shut up. "I have the right of someone who understands what power actually means, and what it doesn't mean." She turned to face the growing crowd of residents, saw their faces tired, wary, afraid to hope for anything better. "How many of you," she asked clearly, "have complained about broken heating?" Slowly hands went up. 5, 10, 15. Broken plumbing. More hands. Requested repairs that never came, paid rent that disappeared into nothing while your children slept in coats because there was no heat. Nearly every hand was raised now. Charlotte turned back to Kowalski. "Here's what's going to happen. Arthur." Arthur produced a checkbook. The sight of it, leather-bound, embossed with gold lettering, made Kowalski's eyes widen. "We're going to buy this building," Charlotte said. "Right now. Tonight." "It's not for sale." "Everything's for sale, Mr. Kowalski. We just need to find the right price." Charlotte nodded to Arthur, who began writing. "Your mortgage on this property is $420,000. You've missed the last 2 payments. The bank is preparing to foreclose. I had my team check." Kowalski's jaw worked. He didn't deny it. "So here's my offer. $500,000 cash. You sign the deed over tonight, you walk away with enough to pay off your debt and have money left over." "That's," Kowalski's face twisted, "that's barely above water. This building's worth at least $700. This building is worth whatever someone's willing to pay for it. And given that it's currently a death trap with more violations than apartments, I'd say $500 is generous." Charlotte's smile had no warmth in it. "But if you'd prefer, we can wait for the city inspectors I've already called. They'll be here first thing Monday morning, with the police and representatives from the tenant rights organization I fund." The color drained from Kowalski's face. "Or," Charlotte continued, "you can take this check, sign these papers, and leave. Keep your freedom. Keep whatever dignity you have left." Arthur held out a pen. For a long moment, Kowalski just stood there. Charlotte could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. Anger versus self-preservation, pride versus survival. Self-preservation won. "Fine." He snatched the pen. "Where do I sign?" "Arthur will show you." Charlotte gestured toward one of the escalades, where a woman in a gray suit was setting up a portable table under an awning. "Miss Rodriguez handles all our acquisitions. She'll walk you through it." As Kowalski trudged toward the car, Charlotte turned to Sarah. The younger woman was staring at her like she'd just watched someone part the Red Sea. "You just—" Sarah's voice failed. She tried again. "You just bought our building." "Technically, Whitmore Holdings bought it. But yes." Charlotte looked up at the structure, the cracked bricks, the boarded windows, the general air of neglect. "It's going to need work. A lot of work. New heating system, obviously. Plumbing upgrades, electrical repairs. Probably a new roof. That'll cost." Sarah did some mental math and gave up. "About $2 million, according to the preliminary estimate Arthur got from our contractors." Charlotte smiled at Sarah's expression. "Don't worry. We have good people. It'll be done right. But the rent." Sarah's hand went to her throat. If you're putting $2 million into renovations, the rent will stay exactly the same. That's non-negotiable. Charlotte's voice was firm. This building will be part of our affordable housing portfolio. Fair rent, proper maintenance, no harassment. That's how we do things. The crowd of residents had crept closer, drawn by the conversation. Mrs. Chen spoke up, her voice heavily accented. You're saying heat will work. No more broken promises. I'm saying the heat will work, the plumbing will work, and if anything breaks, you'll have a phone number that actually gets answered. Charlotte looked around at all of them. You deserve to live somewhere safe, somewhere warm. And now, you will. Mrs. Chen started crying. Then the young mother from 3C. Then others. Sarah wasn't crying. She was staring at Charlotte with an expression that went beyond gratitude into something closer to awe. Or terror. Maybe both. Why? Sarah whispered. We're strangers. You don't owe us. Your son gave me his last $7. Charlotte's voice was soft now, meant just for Sarah and Jaden. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How impossibly beautifully rare? She shook her head. I've spent 40 years in business, Sarah. I've seen what people do when they have power, and what they do when they don't. Your son had nothing and he gave it anyway. That's not something you can teach. That's character. He learned it from his grandfather, Sarah said, her voice thick. And from his mother. Charlotte met her eyes. Don't sell yourself short. This boy didn't learn generosity from nowhere. Jaden, who'd been quiet this whole time, finally spoke. What happens to us now? Now. Charlotte turned to him. Now we go somewhere warm and dry and we talk about your future. Both of you. She glanced at Arthur. Is the car ready? Always, ma'am. The Whitmore estate sat 20 minutes outside the city, behind gates that opened silently at their approach. Sarah pressed her face to the window of the Phantom, watching the driveway unfold a quarter-mile of perfect asphalt, lined with old-growth oaks, their branches forming a cathedral overhead. Jesus Christ, she breathed. Jaden said nothing. He'd gone pale about 5 minutes into the drive and hadn't spoken since. The house mansion really, though, Charlotte hated that word, emerged from the darkness like something from a dream. 3 stories of Georgian brick, warm light glowing from every window columns, framing the entrance like sentries. Arthur pulled smoothly to a stop. A woman in a dark suit was already at the door, holding an umbrella. That's Mrs. Reeves, Charlotte explained. She runs the household. Don't let her scare you. She's fiercer than she looks, but fair. Sarah laughed high and slightly hysterical. None of this is real. I'm going to wake up in 4C with the rent still due and... Charlotte took her hand. It's real. I promise you, Sarah, it's all very real. Inside was warmth and light and the smell of something baking. The entry hall alone was bigger than Sarah's entire apartment, marble floors, a chandelier that probably cost more than Sarah had made in the last 5 years, a sweeping staircase that curved up to the second floor. Hungry? Charlotte asked. Jaden's stomach answered for him with a growl that echoed off the marble. Kitchen it is. Charlotte led them through rooms that Sarah couldn't even process, a library with floor-to-ceiling books, a sitting room with furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum, a dining room with a table that could seat 20. The kitchen was huge and modern and currently occupied by a man in a white chef's coat who was pulling cookies from an oven. Mrs. Whitmore, he beamed. We were so worried. Are you all right? Do you need anything I can make? Marcus, breathe. Charlotte smiled. I'm fine, but my guests are hungry. Very hungry. Say no more. Marcus was already moving, pulling things from the refrigerator. Steaks, I have beautiful ribeyes. Or, if you prefer, there's salmon, or I could do pasta, or... Everything, Charlotte said. Make everything. 20 minutes later, Sarah and Jaden sat at the kitchen island in front of a spread that looked like something from a restaurant. Perfectly seared steaks, butter-poached lobster tails, roasted vegetables that still had a snap to them, fresh bread that steamed when you broke it open. Sarah cut into her steak and nearly moaned. Oh my God. Marcus used to work at Le Bernardin, Charlotte said, picking at her own plate. I stole him 5 years ago. Best decision I ever made. Jaden ate like he was afraid someone would take the food away. 3 bites in, he paused, looked at Charlotte, and said with his mouth full, This is the best thing I've ever tasted. Don't talk with your mouth full, Sarah said automatically. Then, but yeah, he's right. They ate until they couldn't eat anymore. Then Marcus brought out dessert chocolate lava cakes with vanilla ice cream, and somehow they found room for that too. When the plates were finally empty, Charlotte pushed a folder across the counter. What's this? Sarah asked. Open it. Sarah did. Her eyes scanned the first page, then stopped, then went back to the top and started again slower. She looked up. This is a job offer. Property manager for the Whitmore Affordable Housing Division, Charlotte confirmed. You'd oversee all our low-income properties. Make sure they're maintained properly, make sure tenants are treated fairly, make sure another Kowalski never happens again. I don't have any experience. You have the experience that matters. You know what it's like to be on the other side, to be ignored, dismissed, exploited. Charlotte's voice was gentle but firm. I can teach you the business side. I can't teach you empathy. And that's what this job needs most. Sarah's hands were shaking as she turned pages. The salary is $120,000 annually, plus full health insurance, dental vision, 401k matching, 3 weeks paid vacation to start. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. That's more than I make in 2 years. That's what the position pays. You'd be managing 40 buildings, coordinating with contractors, handling tenant relations. It's a real job, Sarah, with real responsibilities. Sarah's voice broke. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it, Charlotte smiled. Though I should mention the position comes with a company car and a housing stipend. Can't have my property manager living in substandard conditions. Bad optics. Sarah laughed and cried at the same time. You're serious. You're actually serious. I'm always serious about business. Charlotte turned to Jaden. And speaking of business, she pulled out another folder. This one was thinner. Jaden Miller, currently attending Roosevelt High, I assume. Jaden nodded, wary. GPA 3.8, he said quietly. Good. Not great, but good. Room for improvement. Charlotte opened the folder. Here's what I'm proposing. The Whitmore Foundation has a scholarship program. Full ride to any university you want. Tuition room, board books, everything. Jaden's fork clattered to the plate. But, Charlotte continued, scholarships aren't given, they're earned. So here's the deal. You keep your grades up. You graduate. And during summers, you work for me. Learn the business. Start from the ground up maintenance, leasing, property management. By the time you finish college, you'll understand every aspect of real estate. Why? Jaden's voice was barely audible. Why would you do this? Charlotte reached across the counter and turned his hand over. There, on a leather cord around his wrist, was the compass. He'd moved it from his neck, but he still wore it. Because your grandfather saved my husband's life, Charlotte said simply. Because you saved mine. And because... She paused, choosing her words carefully. Because I spent 40 years building an empire, Jaden. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. And what's the point of all that if I can't use it to give someone like you the chance you deserve? I'm not special. You gave your last $7 to a stranger. Charlotte's voice was fierce now. In a world that had given you every reason to be selfish, to look out for only yourself, you chose kindness. You chose generosity. That's not just special, Jaden. That's extraordinary. Arthur appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Whitmore, Dr. Patterson is here for Mrs. Miller. Perfect timing. Charlotte stood. Sarah, I took the liberty of calling my personal physician. He's going to look at your back. No arguments. I can't afford. Neither can I. That's why I'm paying. Charlotte's tone allowed no discussion. Arthur will show you to the examination room we set up in the East Wing. As Sarah was led away, still protesting weakly, Charlotte turned back to Jaden. Come with me. There's something I want to show you. She led him through the house to a room that was clearly a study. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs, a fireplace with a fire already burning, and on the mantel in a glass case a medal, the Medal of Honor. That was my husband's, Charlotte said softly. Thomas Whitmore. He served in the 82nd Airborne, your grandfather's unit. She took down a photograph from beside the medal, black and white edges worn with age. 2 young men in uniform, arms around each other's shoulders, grinning at the camera despite the mud and exhaustion evident in their faces. That's Thomas, Charlotte pointed to the man on the left. And that's Grandpa. Jaden's voice was thick. I've never seen this picture. June 1944, 2 days after D-Day. Charlotte's fingers traced the edge of the frame. They were lost behind enemy lines, separated from their unit. Thomas was wounded shrapnel in his leg. Couldn't walk. Your grandfather carried him. She pulled out another photo. This one showed a man, the same man from the first photo, but older, now lying on a stretcher. Standing beside him holding a compass was a younger version of Jaden's grandfather. 15 miles, Charlotte continued, through German-occupied territory, at night. using only that compass to navigate. And when they finally made it back to Allied lines, Thomas was delirious with fever, kept saying, "Miller saved me. Miller brought me home." She looked at Jaden. "That man, your grandfather, gave me 43 years with the love of my life. We built this company together. We raised 2 daughters. We had grandchildren. We had a life." Tears rolled down Jaden's cheeks now, but he didn't try to hide them. "Thomas spent 30 years trying to find your grandfather. Wanted to thank him. Wanted to—" Charlotte's voice wavered. "Wanted to tell him what his courage had meant. But by the time he finally tracked down John Miller, your grandfather had already passed." "I didn't know," Jaden whispered. "He never talked about the war. I knew he served, but he never—" "Brave men rarely do." Charlotte set the photo down carefully. "But they pass on their courage in other ways, in the values they teach, in the examples they set." She met Jaden's eyes. "Your grandfather carried my husband home, Jaden, and tonight you carried me home. That's not coincidence. That's legacy." Winter came again, but this time Sarah Miller stood at the window of her new office and watched the snow fall without fear. The office was modest by Whitmore Standard's 10th floor of the property management building, big enough for a proper desk and a meeting table, with windows that looked out over the East District. Her district now. On the wall behind her desk hung a photograph. The Parkside Apartments transformed. New brick facade, new windows. A small playground in front where there used to be cracked asphalt. People actually sat on the benches now. Kids played without their parents, hovering nervously. It had taken 11 months and just over $2.3 million, but it was done. And it was beautiful. "Mom." Sarah turned. Jaden stood in the doorway and she almost didn't recognize him. Tall, when had he gotten so tall? The private school uniform fit him properly now, tailored to his growing frame. His hair was cut neatly. He carried a leather messenger bag that Charlotte had given him on his first day at Whitmore Academy. But it was his face that had changed most. The wariness was gone. The fear. He looked like a kid who expected good things to happen, who believed in his own future. "Hey, baby," Sarah smiled. "School good. Calculus test tomorrow. Came to use your office to study." He gestured at the conference table. "If that's okay." "Of course." Sarah glanced at her watch. "I've got a site visit at Riverside Towers in an hour. Problem with the boiler. Should be back by 4. I'll be here." He set up his books, and Sarah went back to her computer. This was their routine now. Jaden would come to her office after school, do homework while she finished her work, and then they'd drive home together, to their actual home. The 3-bedroom house in a real neighborhood with good schools and sidewalks where people walked their dogs. Sarah still couldn't quite believe it was real. Her phone rang. The office line. "Sarah Miller, Property Management." "Sarah, it's Charlotte. Got a minute?" "Always." Sarah waved at Jaden to indicate she'd be a while, and he nodded, already absorbed in his textbook. "I'm looking at the quarterly reports." Charlotte's voice came through clear and warm. "Parkside's occupancy is at 98%. Tenant satisfaction scores are the highest in our entire portfolio, and you're under budget on maintenance costs. Well, when things actually get fixed the first time, don't be modest. You're doing excellent work." A pause. "How's Jaden?" "Good. Great, actually. His English teacher says he's got a real gift for writing." "Doesn't surprise me. That boy notices things, feels things." Charlotte's tone shifted slightly. "Listen, I'm calling because I wanted to run something by you. The foundation is expanding our scholarship program. We want to bring on a student liaison, someone who can connect with the kids, help them navigate applications, that sort of thing. Part-time position, but it pays well. And I think Jaden would be perfect for it." Sarah felt her chest tighten with pride. He'd love that. He's been talking about wanting to do more, give back somehow. "Runs in the family." Charlotte laughed. "Tell him to call me tomorrow. We'll work out the details." They talked for a few more minutes about budgets and repairs and the 100 small details that went into running affordable housing properly. When Sarah hung up, she found Jaden watching her. That was Charlotte. "Yeah. She wants to talk to you about a job with the foundation." Jaden's eyes lit up. "Really? Really?" Sarah stood cross to him and kissed the top of his head. "I'm proud of you. You know that." "Mom." He squirmed, but he was smiling. "I mean it. You could have been bitter about how we grew up, about everything we didn't have. But instead," she gestured at his books, at his uniform, at the world of opportunity that had opened up in front of him. "Instead, you turned into this." "I learned from the best." Jaden pulled something from his pocket. A small frame about the size of a playing card. Inside, pressed between two pieces of glass, were 3 bills. A 5, 2 ones, $7. I keep this in my locker at school, Jaden said quietly. When things get hard, or when someone's being a jerk, or when I forget why I'm working so hard, he ran his thumb over the frame. I look at this, and I remember. Sarah's eyes burned. Remember what? That money isn't just money. It's choices. It's power to help people or hurt them. And the best thing you can ever do with it, he looked up at her, is give it to someone who needs it more. Before Sarah could respond, there was a knock on the door. Arthur stood there impeccable as always in his 3-piece suit. Pardon the interruption, he said, but Mrs. Whitmore asked me to deliver this. He held out a small envelope. Sarah took it confused. Inside was a card with Charlotte's handwriting. Jaden, I'm outside. We're going on a field trip. Bring your compass. See, Jaden and Sarah exchanged glances. What's this about? Sarah asked Arthur. I'm afraid I'm not at liberty to say ma'am, but his eyes twinkled. Though I would suggest Jaden bring a warm coat. 10 minutes later, Jaden emerged from the building to find the Phantom idling at the curb. Charlotte sat in the back, bundled in a wool coat, smiling through the window. Get in, she called. We have a stop to make. They drove through the city as the afternoon sun slanted low and golden through the buildings. Charlotte didn't explain where they were going, just watched the streets pass and occasionally pointed out buildings. That one we just acquired, going to convert it to artist lofts. Affordable rent for painters, musicians, writers. The city needs more art. That one we sold last year. The new owners are turning it into a tech incubator. Good for the neighborhood. And that one, she pointed to a gleaming tower of glass and steel. That's the Vanderbilt building, Elizabeth's pride and joy. Jaden noticed the slight edge in her voice. You don't like her much. I respect her business acumen, but I don't respect someone who docks a cleaning woman's pay for an accident caused by faulty equipment. Charlotte's smile was sharp. Though I will say her board of directors was very interested when I sent them documentation of her various labor violations. Cost her about $40 million in settlements. You did that for my mom. I did that for all the mothers working for people like Elizabeth. Charlotte's voice was firm. Power without accountability is just tyranny. Someone has to keep the powerful honest. They pulled up outside a cemetery. Old stone walls, iron gates, rows of headstones stretching back into history. Come on, Charlotte said. They walked through the grounds past graves marking lives from every era. Revolutionary War soldiers, Civil War veterans, immigrants who'd come seeking better lives, all of them rich and poor, reduced to the same thing, a name carved in stone and the hope that someone would remember. Charlotte stopped at a plot beneath an old oak tree. 2 headstones side by side. Thomas Robert Whitmore, 1923 to 2009. Beloved husband, father patriot, and beside it, Charlotte Ann Whitmore, 1957. Reserved my spot already, Charlotte said dryly. Seemed practical. Jaden stood looking at the dates. He died in 2009. You've been alone since then. Not alone. Busy. Charlotte touched Thomas's headstone gently. But yes, 15 years without him. Some days it feels like 15 minutes. Others, 15 lifetimes. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something Jaden recognized: the compass. His compass. The one he'd shown her on the bus. You asked to borrow it last month, Jaden said. Said you wanted to have it cleaned. I lied. Charlotte opened her hand. The compass gleamed, but now there was a second engraving on the back below his grandfather's name, carried by Cap John Miller, who brought my husband home, and by his grandson Jaden, who brought me home. The compass always points true. Jaden's throat closed up. He couldn't speak. I wanted Thomas to know, Charlotte said softly, that his debt was paid, that Miller's grandson found me when I needed it most, that the compass came full circle. She pressed it into Jaden's hand, closing his fingers around it. Your grandfather was right, she continued. It doesn't just show directions. It shows you who you are, who you can be. She met his eyes. And you, Jaden Miller, are someone who brings people home. Never forget that. No matter how much money you make, no matter how successful you become, that's your compass. That's your true north. Jaden wiped his eyes with his sleeve. Thank you. For everything. Don't thank me. Charlotte's voice was firm but kind. You gave me something I'd lost. Hope. Faith in people. The reminder that kindness still exists. She smiled. I should be thanking you. They stood together in the fading light, the old woman and the young man connected by history and chance, and 7 crumpled dollars that had changed everything. "Mrs. Whitmore," Jaden said after a moment. "Charlotte, please, I've told you 100 times. Charlotte," he smiled. "Do you believe in fate now?" She considered the question, looked at the compass in his hand, looked at her husband's grave, looked at this boy who'd appeared in her life when she needed him most. "I believe," she said finally, "that the world is full of small moments that seem like nothing. A bus fare, a cup of tea, a compass passed down through generations. And I believe that those small moments, when met with courage and kindness, can change everything." The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Arthur waited by the car, patient as always. "Come on," Charlotte said. "Let's go home. Your mother's probably wondering where you are." As they walked back through the cemetery, Jaden hung the compass around his neck. It settled against his chest, warm from Charlotte's hand, heavy with history and meaning. The compass always points true. And as they drove back through the city, past the Parkside apartments where families were coming home to warm houses, past the office where Sarah was finishing her work, past all the places where small acts of kindness were happening in the dark, Jaden understood what his grandfather had meant. The compass didn't just point home. It pointed to who you were when nobody was watching, what you chose when the choice was hard, how you treated people when you had nothing to gain from treating them well. That was true north. That was home. 5 years later, Jaden Miller graduated from Columbia University with degrees in business and urban planning. He gave the valedictorian speech, though he almost didn't. He had to be convinced by his mother, his professors, and one very insistent 73-year-old woman who refused to take no for an answer. In his speech, he talked about $7, about a rainy night, and a choice that seemed small, but turned out to be everything. About the compass his grandfather carried through war, and the one everyone carries inside themselves. Charlotte sat in the front row, crying openly for the second time in her life. After the ceremony, as graduates celebrated and took pictures and prepared to step out into their futures, Jaden found Charlotte standing by herself, looking at the campus. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Wouldn't have missed it for the world." She smiled at him. "Your grandfather would be proud. Your mother is proud. I'm proud." "I got a job offer," Jaden said. "Good one. Investment firm in Manhattan. Starting salary is $200,000. Charlotte's eyebrows rose. "Impressive." "I turned it down." "Did you now?" Jaden pulled the compass from under his graduation gown. "I'm coming to work for you. For the foundation. I want to do what you do, make sure people have warm homes and fair rent, and someone who gives a damn about their lives." He met her eyes. "I want to bring people home." Charlotte was crying again, but she was also smiling. "You sure that investment firm could?" "I'm sure." Jaden's voice was steady. "Money is just money, Charlotte. You taught me that. It's what you do with it that matters." She reached out and squeezed his hand. "Then welcome aboard, Mr. Miller. Though I should warn you, I'm a demanding boss." "I've heard." He grinned. "Something about being fierce but fair." "Damn right." They walked together across the campus, teacher and student past and future, 2 people connected by $7 and a debt that could never really be repaid because kindness doesn't work that way. Behind them, Sarah took a picture. It would hang in her office for the next 30 years. Her son and the woman who'd given them everything walking side by side into the future. And around Jaden's neck, the compass caught the afternoon sun and gleamed. The compass always points true, always.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.